we're going to go ahead and get started. And we'll just go ahead and jump into it. I guess we've got all the presentations lined up together so we can have smooth transition, and we'll stop. And you know, have a time for discussion. But really, as we're going through the presentation, don't be shy if you want to ask questions as we're going through. We want to make sure you're kind of staying with us. So I guess what's the best way? Who am I asking this to, Nathan? What's the best way for people to let you know that they might want to have a question?
I believe everyone has the ability to raise their hand, so we can see that. And if Travis and Amy, if you guys want to help me out, looks like Covey's already raising his.
Oh, okay, good.
Don't acknowledge him. Just.
I think, does everyone have the ability to unmute themselves? So I don't think we have to unmute you or anything. So yeah. Chairman Covey, would you like to say something?
No, let's get it going.
Okay, he's just showing that he knows how to raise his hand.
Oh, I see. Demonstration.
Okay, yeah. All right, yeah, just let us know. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and get started. This is our agenda for today, and we'll just kind of work our way through it. We have the first presentation and the last are probably the longest. The 2 and 3 are a little shorter, the county comp plan, because it is just an amendment to the plan that you all adopted last year, and then the GO plan amendments, there's only a few of those. So I'll turn it, well, let's see here. What's the next slide? So this is the neighborhood infill overlay that in the past, when we've talked with you about it, it was the missing middle housing. It's really to help accommodate that in neighborhoods. And there's a lot that kind of led up to this. So I guess I'll just go ahead and let Travis get started.
Okay. Yeah. Good morning, commissioners. I have not met all of you, so I'll introduce myself. Travis Hulse, I'm the principal planner in the planning and design group, work with all of these fine people. Susan, obviously our director, Nathan Foster, senior planner, and Amy Ulmer, one of our planners, have really been working on this collaboratively. So I'm going to present along with Nathan basically where we've come over the past number of months. We talked with the commission, it was a while ago. Last year, we kind of started to introduce this a little bit. If you remember, as part of the housing study, there were some recommendations that talked about looking at these issues within the zoning code. So we've done quite a bit of work since then. We'll talk a little bit about, again, just what missing middle housing is, kind of the what and why. We'll review a little bit of what plans and different policy documents we have that really support this type of effort and initiative. Go over some of our survey results. We've been doing a fair amount of outreach with this conversation, both broadly, citywide, but also have been doing some surveying with our local development community and some of the neighborhoods that we feel like will most likely fall within this overlay and most likely be affected. So we'll talk about that a little bit, and then we'll highlight some of our barriers to development that we've noted as we've been going through this process. And then Nathan's going to cover really what the proposed zoning code changes may look like for the overlay itself, and then just kind of our next steps moving forward. So missing middle is a term that you'll hear, and you've probably heard. Really what it means is these types of housing options you see on the right part of your screen. It's basically everything between a single family detached home all the way up to kind of a large multi-unit, multi-family apartment building. So we're focusing kind of in this group in the middle of that spectrum. And specifically for Tulsa, these are actually examples pulled from Tulsa that you can see here. Thinking about apartments, townhomes, condos, duplexes, multi-unit homes, kind of everything there. As we've gone through this process of really talking about what makes sense for Tulsa and what we've identified as the neighborhood surrounding downtown, we've really been thinking a lot about how these building types can often be similar in size and scale, but essentially just add more unit density So a lot of times these examples, they can look and feel pretty similar to what you see in an existing neighborhood, which is important. It's been a big part of our conversation as we've reached out to many people. So we feel like these are kind of those housing types that fit that, from a scale perspective, but also allow for greater density. And I'll talk about some of the other benefits here in a second. So when we talk about missing middle, that's really what we're talking about. And this graphic kind of, again, just reiterates that. Missing middle has a number of, benefits. We see this trend nationwide. This is not just a Tulsa specific thing. Tulsa's maybe behind a little bit on getting to where these options are available in a lot of existing neighborhoods, and especially these neighborhoods that we'll talk more about here in a minute. But the benefits, I think, that we see and we hear a lot about, one is greater affordability. When you have different housing options, that allows for different square foot, different size, different living arrangements, preferences, lifestyles. And that can really provide an option for communities struggling with growing housing costs, and just in general giving a better options for people who want to live in their neighborhoods and expand, either expanding their families or even those moving into retirement, empty nesters. So missing middle can really help to accommodate a lot of that. It's also a great way, typically, in what we're looking for with this overlay, is to make more efficient use of land that's currently kind of available in our neighborhoods that can already have access to public infrastructure. So, we wouldn't be looking at, versus a new subdivision where you may be extending water and sewer and streets and, all of those types of things. This would essentially be relying on the public infrastructure network that's already in place. So those are a few of the things that I think are really important to kind of be thinking about. So I mentioned our outreach. This gives you a sense of who we've talked to, starting late last year, and then working through the beginning part of this year. We focused a lot of our time talking about the neighborhoods highlighted here. These neighborhoods, why these specifically? It really has to do with the connection to the housing study. This is essentially the boundary of the housing study, if you recall. And so these are many of the neighborhoods where the consultant that was hired to identify the market demand for the next 10 years said that, yes, there's definitely an opportunity for expanding housing options, talking about the affordability aspect. So we've focused most of our time engaging with developers about these communities and asking, are they seeing more of an opportunity for infill and, developing things like duplexes and small unit apartments, multi-unit homes, things like that. And I think we've heard kind of a resounding yes. There's a lot of interest from the development community, and I think we're seeing that more and more in some of these areas already. The Heights is a good example. We're starting to see some good development, infill development there, and it's not your typical single family detached homes. It's kind of a mixture of things. You do still see that, certainly, but so we found support there. And then we've met a lot with the community members because we want to know, one, is there support for it from the community? I think that we understand that in developing an overlay and something like this tool oftentimes can be scary. People aren't real sure what that's going to lead to for them and what they can do with their property, how it affects their neighborhood and what they're used to. We've heard some concerns, some questions, regarding parking. What will that look like if we add more units? How will that impact the streets and, parking, and just some of those same things that we hear even in other parts of the city. I think we've heard some concerns about affordability a little bit, maybe more from the perspective of what will this do to my property values? And, I think we've talked through that a little bit, and I feel like at the end of the day, people are very supportive of this, and pretty consistently across the board. Not all neighborhoods are the same. They don't all have the same preferences and feelings about the different housing options that we've kind of presented within this missing middle framework. But generally, I think what Nathan will talk about in the zoning code amendments reflects kind of that compromise or that kind of sweet spot, I guess, for what I think there is a lot of support for. I saw a comment, Mike, as far as, let me go to this.
Disregard that.
Do you want to tell me what you're thinking there, Mike, just about not seeing Maple Ridge and thoughts about that?
As Susan well picked up on that, I was just being. I do have a question in reviewing that. Is the changes will impact the entire city, correct?
So what Nathan will go over, there's a couple of amendments we're going to propose that do have citywide implications, but primarily what I've talked mostly about with missing middle and new housing and all that, that's going to just be focused on these highlighted neighborhoods.
Well, and if there is an impact, why are we not having community meetings in other areas of the city that may be impacted is my thought process. Why are we not making this broader if the impact's broader?
Yeah, no, and I think so from the changes that we're going to propose that do have a citywide impact, we did have some outreach. It wasn't as focused where we had like these neighborhood meetings. We did have a couple of meetings that people were able to come kind of talk about infill and the impacts of some of these different concepts. We didn't get as much into missing middle and all the different housing types, but we had a survey that went out to ask about how people feel about infill, just adding new homes into their neighborhoods. I'm trying to think of, whatever specifics as far as what that outreach has looked like, I could kind of get to you. But we have done that. I think as far as the changes that we're going to propose, I can pretty confidently say those are things that shouldn't surprise people. We've talked to them about those various issues, the ones that have been willing to engage anyways. I can't say that everybody participated that might see this and might have a thought or opinion about it, but we did make the opportunity for people to come talk about some of those issues.
So our thought is as well that when we have the overlay established in the code, other neighborhoods that might want to take advantage of some of those other housing opportunities, they can apply to be an overlay. These are just the ones that were really specifically studied and came out of the housing study that the counselors are supportive of us moving forward with it as initially. So the overlay could be in other places of the city if those neighborhoods so chose to take advantage of that.
So real quick, just to highlight some of the plan and policies that we do have in place, again, supporting this thought of developing an overlay. So this was from the housing study. I think I've put this in front of this group a couple of times, but just to kind of reiterate where we're coming from, and you can see that boundary, which again, basically mirrors our outreach efforts. So there was a priority action in the housing study that really recommended we start looking at barriers to infill development, examining the zoning code really specifically to see if there are things that we could address to open the door to more affordability, different housing options, kind of all the things that I've highlighted a little bit there. So the housing study certainly encouraged that. that was pretty broadly accepted as far as recommendations and what people are comfortable with. We also have, even just our long-standing policies that have been adopted through our small area planning. All of these are pretty recent, within the past, 5-ish years, 5-6 years, give or take. So Crutchfield, Pearl District, Unity Heritage Neighborhoods, Crosby Heights, again, pretty much every neighborhood that we've included in our outreach and in this overlay, except for maybe like the Riverview area. They don't have a plan necessarily as recent. They were included as a part of the downtown area master plan, strangely enough, but so there's a lot of concepts though that I think overlap in just supporting, increased housing choices and different things like that in these neighborhoods specifically. So our outreach is, it's kind of just continued to build upon itself and making sure there was support there. Even with what we've done recently, I think we've heard a lot of those same things in years past. The comp plan is another place where we see this just called out pretty broadly as a goal for the city. So, I think there's a lot of support there, has been for quite some time. And the zoning code changes, that we went through years ago, I think opened up a lot of opportunity and kind of made a little bit of progress there. And so we're just kind of continuing to build upon that with this overlay. Wanted to just briefly share, this is one of the questions that we surveyed citywide. This specific graphic is breaking down what we heard from people who live within those neighborhoods around downtown. So this just kind of gives you a sense of what we heard from people. The question being, you can read up there at the top, if such a building were well located within downtown or the surrounding neighborhoods, would you be interested in this type of building? So more than 50% said that they would be interested in some form of apartments. Still a lot of preference for detached homes, but then, equally as much things like duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, townhomes. So this, I think, really encouraged us to feel like people really are supportive of adding some diversity in the neighborhoods that exist within Tulsa. So we kind of took that as an opportunity to start to frame the overlay and what we think makes the most sense. And I feel like we've asked that question 2 or 3 times just to make sure we're being very clear with people. If we approach you with an overlay at a public hearing and it includes these housing types, are you going to be supportive of it? Do you not like, certain things? So I feel like we've really reiterated that time and time again to make sure we're clear about what we're asking. And we asked, even more so specifically, what interests people in these options. So this is an example of, for people who are very interested in things like efficient use of infrastructure, housing price options, in addition of new, can't read that because my face is in the way, new families. The blue color indicates there's a lot of interest, for those things. So if you can look at the word Tulsa, we're kind of talking or all in around that area. So a little bit of an anomaly within the IDL, specifically not as much interest maybe, but the overlay is not going to be touching the IDL. I think everyone kind of knows that's a no-no. So that's, I think, just a way to say there's support for these things. So I'm going to let Nathan get into the barriers, kind of what we've done as far as the zoning code and where we're at. If there's not any questions, I'll let him take it from here.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Travis. So as Travis mentioned in a lot of his information, one of the first steps identified when we were thinking about implementing any of the changes that were being brought up as parts of these goals or recommendations was to really examine our existing ordinances to see where we were standing in the way of the development of some of these types of uses. And we know that in our current code, how we define each of these different housing types is sometimes a little different than maybe what the consultant used. And so we had to go in and really draw lines between what is the use that is in our code versus what is the use that they've talked about. And in doing that, we really had to figure out where those were allowed and where we were prohibiting them. And then in addition to that, looking at how our lot and building regulations and what the existing lot patterns would do for allowing those types of uses to be developed once they were allowed. So in discussing permitted uses, each of these slides actually is going to tell you the citywide changes, if any, and then what we're doing in the overlay. So that'll help kind of elaborate a little more for Mike Craddock's question earlier. But we're not touching uses on a citywide basis. That's really only focused in the overlay. And we're focused in the zoning districts that are RS3 through RM3 as they're defined in terms of the density in the zoning code. And that list of uses that you see is the use type that's defined in our zoning code. So in going into the overlay area, we want to open up the opportunity to develop these types of housing by right without the need to go through any sort of rezoning or through the Board of Adjustment. As it stands today, if you're in any single family district, you're exclusively reserved to single family homes by right, but you can do duplexes with special exceptions. Most of those other uses would be prohibited unless you were already within some sort of multifamily or a commercial district. So that's a pretty big change for some of the neighborhoods where previously you would have been very limited on what uses would be allowed. For lot and building regulations, currently our code has some pretty high requirements for lot area and lot area per units that try to control density in other parts of the city and oftentimes just become barriers to what we believe could be appropriate development anyway. So first I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing citywide in this aspect, and it's very minor, I think, in the way we've approached it. But essentially, we already allow for duplexes, townhomes, and cottage house developments in certain districts, but we subject them to some very heavy lot and building regulations that often prevent any opportunities to actually implement those types of uses, even though they are allowable. Specifically, when talking about duplexes, we would often take a requirement that you first go get a special exception. So you'd be going through the Board of Adjustment to get the use approved, but then you also would be required to have 9,000 square feet of lot area, which was pretty unusual in any single family existing neighborhood where somebody was interested in building a duplex. And since duplexes are really subject to the same setbacks, same height requirements, they fit in the same envelope as a single family home, it really didn't make sense that they would need so much extra lot area just to support that use. So we're making adjustments to those. In addition to that, there was a provision in our code that said if you got a special exception for any type of use, you had to be set back 25 feet from adjacent residential districts. So if you had a 50-foot wide lot in a residential neighborhood and you wanted to try and build any kind of duplex, not only were you getting told that you don't have enough lot area, but you were also being told half your lot is restricted if you were next door to a residential district. If you were between two residential lots, you would be totally ruled out of being able to do any sort of special exception. So what we've done is take that and apply it to what we think was intended initially, which is special exceptions for non-residential uses like a church or a school or something of that nature that can go into a residential district will still be subject to that 25-foot setback. But if it's a special exception for some type of residential use, that would be out of the way, and you would just follow the typical setbacks of any other structure. In the overlay, we're doing a little bit more drastic changes to those things. One of the things we realized very early on was that these neighborhoods that we're talking about, many of the lots already don't conform to the zoning code. They were mostly all developed way before the zoning code that we have today, or even the one that we adopted in 1970. And that code really set up a standard of a 60-foot wide lot in RS3 district, which is the most common single family district that's around. And so what we noticed was really we have lots that are lesser than 50 feet wide in most of these neighborhoods. And so without making any adjustments to the lot and building regulations and only opening up the allowance of the uses, we really were not opening up much space for people to go in and implement anything because those lots were going to be too small to actually get through any of those lot and building regulations. So we've significantly reduced, for the overlay purposes, the lot and building regulations for all of those uses. And we've set a standardized table, which is the draft in the packet? So you guys have a copy of that table in your packet with the work session materials. What we did was really create just one table of lot and building regulations that would apply to all of those uses and sets a standard 40-foot wide lot with a 4,000 square foot lot area, without the requirements for lot area per unit that you would find in other lot and building regulations. So it really just sets a standard lot and a standard footprint for buildings that, as long as those uses are approved and you're able to utilize that space and meet your parking and other things, then that would be an opportunity for that to be implemented on that lot. So those are where some very drastic changes would have been made in the overlay to what would exist today. Relating to non-conforming lots, we aren't making any changes to that on a citywide basis. But what we are going to do in the overlay is say, if even after we've made these different pieces of lot and building regulations lesser, you still don't meet the code requirements, you would be considered a legal non-conforming lot, and you would be given the allowance to still build a single detached house, a duplex, or a multi-unit house on that non-conforming lot. Whereas today, and also citywide still, you can only utilize non-conforming lots for single family homes. You don't get those options for duplex and multi-unit house. But those were two things that we felt like, again, really fall in the same building envelope as the detached home in a lot of cases, and just adds those additional units and that variety of housing that we're looking for. For parking, we're not proposing anything citywide. Within the overlay, we're reducing the minimum parking requirements by 50%, which really tries to get it to about one space per dwelling unit when we're talking about apartments or multi-unit homes or duplexes. Today, you really get up higher than that, and parking begins to eat up a lot of those lots that we're talking about in relation to the space needed for buildings and for those homes. So by reducing the parking requirement, we feel pretty confident that we can help open up more building space by reducing overall where dedicated parking areas have to be. The housing study identified early on that really those that were looking for these types of housing were also more prone to using public transit or potentially using alternative modes of transportation like biking, and that parking isn't as required here as it may be in other parts of the city when it comes to who will be actually living here. So that with that reduction, we think that's going to also provide additional opportunities and reduce the overall cost of being able to develop these different uses. So talking about next steps, Susan mentioned earlier about how we first will amend the text of the zoning code to adopt the overlay standards within that. So we're going to return to the neighborhoods with our final draft. When we talked to them initially, we didn't have a final draft of those amendments. We were just really trying to gain feedback so that we could utilize that information to develop our draft. Once we're finished with that re-engagement, we'll be coming back to TMAPC with that same draft for a hearing and a recommendation to be made to City Council before they can actually adopt the new text within the zoning code. Our hope is that at the same time we're adopting the text amendment to bring the overlay into the text document, that City Council would also then initiate our map amendments so that we can begin applying those standards that we've adopted on the zoning map and in these neighborhoods that we've already talked with. And obviously that's going to prompt one more round of engagement once we're actually going out and selecting the boundaries and applying this to the zoning map. We're going to go back and talk to those neighbors one more time before ultimately ending up in front of you guys for a last time to make a recommendation on those map amendments for those neighborhoods, with a hope that that eventually lands at the council and is adopted so that those use types and those amendments become effective. And that's it for the neighborhood character info overlay. We're happy to answer questions if anyone has them. Oh, I can read them out here. Yep. All right.
Is that everybody?
I think that's everybody
It doesn't look like
that
everybody.
has their name.
I don't see Michael Covey. Oh, there he is. Okay.
You do see him?
Yeah, I do. So does anyone have any questions or comments or anything before we move on? So as you know, for those of you who've been through overlays in the past, it's a little complicated and there'll be a lot of discussions and steps along the way. So we're not sure exactly when we'll be back to planning commission for a hearing for this, but we're hoping that it will be in the spring, early summer at least, so we can kind of keep the process moving to be able to ultimately apply it to some neighborhoods.
Looks like Ashley has her hand up.
Oh,
Sorry, I was too slow to speak earlier. I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I just wanted to say that I thought that or that I really appreciated the imagery in the presentation and how it included diversity. Like I saw a person in a wheelchair or whatever. I just thought that that was really good on their part of doing that.
thank you. All right, if we don't have anything else, we'll go ahead and keep it moving. The next presentation, Robbie will be giving this presentation. It's an amendment to the Tulsa County Comprehensive Land Use Plan. As you remember, the land use plan was fully updated last year. I think we finally got it updated by the end of last year. So now occasionally we'll see amendments as especially as municipalities make them, and for the other areas, you know, we'll probably have them as well. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Robbie. Did you see her?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Well, good morning and happy St. Patrick's Day. I'm Robbie Jones, community planner, and we'll go ahead and move forward with the slides and I'll explain what we're doing. So the unincorporated area within the Jinx fence line was adopted in 2019. It was part of the first set of adoptions for the new comp plan for Tulsa County. Their original comp plan at that time, they were using one that was had been adopted in 1978, and it had last been updated in 2014. They had not updated it again, or I'm sorry, made the new comp plan, which is at Horizon Jinx. It got adopted in September of 2020. And so that's why we're coming to you now, just to ask for an amendment to that plan that will meet our needs. This is what the land use map looked like in 2019. You can see the new plan. They've gone from using intensities to using different land uses. And also we've cleaned up the maps. I think that you can see the parcel data, the streets on this new map. It's a little bit clearer and it's just the updated version. Go on to the next, okay. And then this are those legends up close so you can see them on either side. The previous, like I said, it was based on intensities. The new plan uses the 13 individual land uses, and it just gives a clearer reflection of the current character and future growth patterns within the city of Jinx, and also within the unincorporated fence line of Jinx. The Horizon Jinx comp plan was completed using a planning process that included extensive public outreach and engagement with city staff, the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee, and the community at large. This is what the map looks like. You see a little bit closer than the other one. And so we have the opportunity to go in and even see what the floodplain looks like on this, and then all of the individual parcels. And this is taken from their comp plan. This is going to be more in line with how all of the others have been written so far. We've got the designation and the description. This is in your packet. We've just highlighted 3 of them here on the screen. Okay.
Robbie, it looks like Michael Covey has his hand up.
Oh, okay.
So Robbie, if you go back a slide to the actual map itself, am I looking at that correctly? It looks like the majority of the Jinx comp plan has no land use designation.
Okay, let me explain that. So the gray area is within the corporated or the city of Jinx.
Okay,
So we're not looking at all, that does have land uses on it, but all
Okay.
we're looking at in the county plan would be the parts that are in the unincorporated areas.
gotcha. So,
So-
so all the color that I'm seeing on the map, those are the county areas.
That's correct.
Gotcha.
And there's not a whole lot. We don't have a lot of cases that come through from Jinx area, but those are the few.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for clearing that up.
And then we've been through that one. And then the next steps are just to bring it to Planning Commission April 21st. And then after that, it goes to the Board of County Commissioners.
Robbie,
Uh-huh.
have you touched base with Teresa Tosh at our inspections department? As far as
We talked quite a bit, yes.
on specifically on this plan?
We haven't had any cases on this plan that we've discussed, no? Is there something that you are,
No, I just wanted to, I mean, she was in my office earlier. I just asked her about it if she had, if you two had chatted about this, and she seemed like she was unaware of the new plan. So,
And procedurally, the permit office really doesn't interact with long-range plans. That's sort of too far removed from the process that they administer. We really administer those through the zoning process. So, you know, Teresa really follows the zoning that's in place that ultimately we hope was informed by the plan when it came through our process. So it sort of trickles down to her, but she wouldn't be dealing with this immediately. I mean, directly.
right, but if she's going to be impacted by it, then that's, you know, input is what I was thinking of, if needed. So, okay.
all right, thank you.
Okay. I'll go ahead and we can move on to the Go Plan amendments. So I think you met Peyton. I think you may have even met him in person right before we kind of all had this world evolve. So Peyton, are you here?
Yes, I am, Susan. I'll get started. So good morning, commissioners. Yeah, like Susan had said, we met about a year ago to discuss last cycle's Go Plan amendments. And I met some of you in person, but I don't think I've met all of you because I think there's some new commissioners here. So yeah, my name is Peyton Wines. I'm the urban design planner with the Tulsa Planning Office. And so I'm going to walk you through the Go Plan amendments here. Just a little bit of background on it. This Go Plan was adopted by the TMAPC and the City Council back in 2017. Since that time, we've had a couple series of Go Plan requested amendments. If you recall last year, there was quite a few. There was about 22 last year. And so this year there's only about 4. So we'll just get started walking through those. Next slide, please. So first, I wanted to walk through just the process we have for logging these Go Plan requested amendments to the Go Plan. So this cycle runs typically between February 1st and January 31st of each calendar year. Any party can submit requests for a Go Plan amendment. And so what I do is I just have a spreadsheet that I log those in. And then typically what happens is after that January 31st deadline passes is I'll take that spreadsheet and I'll distribute it around to INCOG Transportation, Engineering Services, Traffic Operations, MTTA, and the city councilors whose districts are affected by these proposed amendments. And I'll submit those for their comments and review. And so that has already happened for this cycle. We then take it here to the TMAPC work session, and then next to the public hearing for adoption, and then finally to City Council for consideration of approval or denial. So starting here with the locations that were requested for this year's Go Plan amendment cycle. Location 1 is up in North Tulsa. It would be an extension off of Oklahoma Street between Hartford Avenue and the Osage Prairie Trail. And so the proposal here would be to develop a multi-use trail that would connect Carver Middle School and some of the senior housing south of the middle school over to a couple of the health complexes as well as the Osage Prairie Trail. This proposed multi-use trail, it's only about 0.05 miles in length, so it's a very small segment. And the request like I said, primarily came out of connecting some of those, the school and housing facilities over to the trail. But also there's a presence of what we call a goat trail in that section right now, meaning that the grass is worn down, indicating a lot of pedestrian usage in that area. So that's the map you can see on the left. Location 2 with the map that's inset on the right. This was proposed by the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. They were looking at wanting to do a proposed signed route between Riverside Drive and Denver Avenue, and then bicycle lanes from Denver Avenue onto Quaker Avenue, just east of Peoria there on Cherry Street. There were quite a few concerns, though, expressed about these segments from engineering services, MTTA, and INCOG transportation, for the fact that, number one, on the signed route between Riverside Drive and Denver Avenue, there's a lot of elevation changes if you've been in there. And so this would make it kind of a tricky area for cyclists and automobile users as far as looking out for one another. You also have parallel parking with the housing that's in there. So that raised some concerns. And then for the proposed bicycle lane section between Riverside Drive and Quaker, the concerns there drove primarily from the fact that A, it's a high volume corridor. B, there's a lot of crashes there between all users right now. There's about, I think the number was around 387, 389 over a 10-year period. So you're looking at about an average of 38 crashes per year on this corridor. But also there's really not a lot of space for bicycle lanes, because as you go east from Denver towards Quaker, you have the introduction of, you're coming off of the expressway there. There's an exit ramp for that as well. And so it widens out, but then it narrows back down as you approach Peoria. And so you're left with these tight 9-foot lanes. And so it really doesn't give any room for bicycle lanes. So, so those were some of the concerns expressed with location 2. Next slide, please. Location 3, this was out in West Tulsa. This was requested by a developer who is developing on the north side of Edison. The request was to connect Edison to the Katy Trail via bicycle lanes and the filling of sidewalk gaps. Now, keep in mind, this was going to be achieved on 49th West Avenue. And just keep in mind here, there is a planned CIP project right here for this stretch. And so the sidewalk gaps will be addressed with that project. However, there were some concerns here as well, kind of by the same parties as on the last location. Simply for the fact that, and we actually walked this route, me and Jane Ziegler with INCOG Transportation, as well as Michael Van Slyke with traffic operations. There's a high traffic volume on this corridor. It's only a two-lane road right now, and the traffic speeds are a little high to designate any sort of bike lane there. And so it was kind of the initial thoughts of the reviewing parties that it may be better suited to include sharrows on 41st West Avenue, just to the east of this corridor, because A, you have lower traffic speeds. I think the average traffic speed was about 5 miles an hour lower on 41st West Avenue. You also have lower traffic volumes. It was only about half as many vehicles on 41st West Avenue as on 49th, as well as a presence of a school. And so kind of the suggestion would be maybe to include sharrows from Edison to Charles Page to connect with the bicycle lanes down there on 41st West Avenue. Then finally, location 4, this is between 13th Street and 10th Street on Lewis Avenue. Right now it's designated for bicycle lanes, but the request was to eliminate the designation for bicycle lanes between 10th and 13th. Mainly because right now it's a 3-lane road, so there's really no room to place those bicycle lanes, but also you have an upcoming 11th and Lewis streetscape project that will be happening, and some of those curbs and sidewalks are going to be extended out towards the center line of the roadway, and so there's still not going to be any room for those bicycle lanes. And so one of the suggestions or thoughts from specifically Matt Lichty from Engineering Services is that to replace that north-south connection, you would place signed routes on Zunis Avenue to the west of this intersection, and then on Lewis Place to the east of this intersection. So those are the 4 locations of the requested GO plan amendments. Yeah, tentatively, we're looking at April 21st for the public hearing on this to the TMAPC, and then kind of a date to be determined for presentation to the City Council based on that results of the public hearing. So, so that's all I have, and I'll try to answer any questions you have, if you have any at this time.
So any questions? Also, I believe Jane Ziegler's on the call. She's our bike head planner here at INCOG. So if you had any questions for her too? I think she's here. Yep. Okay. Well, if we're good, then we'll go ahead and move on to the last presentation. Let me set this up a little bit. You've seen, I can't remember how many times we've brought the Destination District program to you. Feels like at least twice, but it's been a long couple of years, so I don't know. But and I know you know former Planning Commissioner Louisa Krug, so so she manages that program. This is going to be a presentation, really a joint presentation. The first part is about destination districts, which those of you who've been on the commission for a little bit are somewhat familiar with it. So it won't be new to you, but the part that will be new to everyone is the neighborhood, Vibrant Neighborhoods Partnership Program. That's a new program that we have, and we really see them as, you know, as counterparts. So we have the commercial districts with the destination districts, and then the neighborhood planning and the neighborhood work with the neighborhoods. And so Louisa and Emily Scott, who I'm not sure you've met, she'll be presenting the neighborhood part. She is our neighborhood planner. She's the planner that really is administering this program. So so they're really good complements to each other, and Louisa and Emily are working together very closely. So this is not work that comes through the Planning Commission, but it's so important, and it's really just, I think we're going to see great things as a result of both programs. So I wanted you to be aware of these. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Lisa.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you again. I actually don't think that I have ever presented to Planning Commission on destination districts. So I think that it has been at least 15 months since we've talked about this at Planning Commission. So I'm going to talk about the Destination Districts program, and then Emily will talk about Vibrant Neighborhoods Partnership, and then we're going to talk a little bit together just about how they collaborate. So just a background, the Destination Districts program was created in February of 2019. So it's a commercial revitalization program focused on areas with historical or cultural significance, and it utilizes the Main Street model. So in February 2019, that was when Ed was in this position, and then I started in this position in December of 2019. So basically, since that time, we've created 2 new main streets in Tulsa, and you might be aware of the 2 main streets that were currently existing in Tulsa, which is the Route 66 Main Street and Kendall Whittier Main Street. But since 2019, we've created the Historic Greenwood District Main Street, which is in the northeast corner of the IDL, and then some expanding some north of the highway. And then East Tulsa Main Street, sometimes we call that the International District. We're actually going through a branding process right now to really kind of nail down that name. But that's basically focused on the intersection at 21st and Garnett. So as you likely are aware, there's a lot of historical and cultural significance of the Historic Greenwood District with the race massacre, and it just being the site of Blackwall Street. And then in East Tulsa, there's really a lot of cultural significance with it being the most diverse area in Tulsa. So you see a lot of immigrant populations there. There's a large Latino population, and then also a large Asian population there. So also in this time, we're continuing to support actually, can you go back for a second? Sorry. We're also continuing to support the Kendall Whittier Main Street and Route 66 Main Street. So I just wanted to point out that, like, since a lot of this work has been done since we've all been on Zoom. So there's some people that have been involved in these main streets that we've never even actually met in person, which I'm sure everyone has had that experience, but it's been quite a journey creating these new organizations while we're all on Zoom. So this is the East Tulsa Main Street working on their strategic planning session in August of 2020. So yeah, sorry, you can move to the next one. So just like a little bit of an overview of what the programs have been working on. East Tulsa Main Street has hired an executive director. He started in February. His name is Jeff. They are going through a naming and a branding process right now. So they're working with GetWit and developing, like they'll develop their name and their logo and identity, and that'll then translate into different elements like environmental placement of that brand in the area. I'm not sure how familiar you all are with the area at 21st and Garnett, but it's pretty spread out. It's not very walkable. So we want to do some placemaking things that kind of make it feel more like a place, more like a cohesive area. And then they also worked on this underpass mural, this photo that you see here. There's a pedestrian underpass that it's about at 41st and 169. It connects Roy Clark Elementary on the west side and then a bunch of neighborhoods on the east side. And it was like full of trash, full of graffiti. And so we, several of my coworkers and I and people from East Tulsa Main Street went out and cleaned it all out and we painted it. So just like an example of some small placemaking projects, we did this project for like $900. So a small investment, but hopefully something that just makes the area more comfortable and encourages people to walk. So the Historic Greenwood District Main Street is working on their strategic planning. They've identified a mission and a vision and they're working on goals, and from there we'll hire an executive director. They've also been working on branding. They have a logo that they will similarly be rolling out through environmental placement of that logo, banners, things like that. And then they also hosted an event called Welcome to Greenville, which was a Christmas event, a Christmas light display. I actually have a picture on the next slide, just to have something for the community to come and enjoy at Christmas time. Route 66 Main Street, they are working on a small business program with TEDC, where they have support entrepreneurs and then encourage them to start their business in the area. And then Kendall Whittier Main Street, what we're working on with them is renewing the Whittier Square Improvement District, or renewing the Whittier Square Improvement District, which is an assessment for property owners in the area to provide services like landscaping, trash removal, things like that. And then they also were actually the winner of the GAMSA Award this year, which is the Great American Main Street Award. So they were one of 3 people selected nationally to be as like the best Main Street in America in the National Main Street Program. So future objectives of the program, really, like I've been working pretty much in the last year, primarily with those 2 new districts and then somewhat with the existing districts. But the future objectives are really to expand the program to support other commercial districts. So we know not every district will want to become a Main Street or might not be ready to become a Main Street. So we want to do things like training programs, technical assistance, and then hopefully identify funding for some grant programs that could support those districts on a smaller level. Again, maybe not to the extent of a full Main Street, but you know, targeted, like maybe they need funding for a specific placemaking project or things like that. Next steps, we're developing an interest survey so that we can gauge districts' interest on that and how we could best support them. And then we'll just continue to support these existing programs. So this picture here is of the Christmas light display. And I think that's, I think I'll turn it over to Emily, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask me.
Okay, so yeah, I can lead us right into vibrant neighborhoods, and then we'll circle back to how we interact, and we can have some more time for questions too. But good morning, counselors. My name is Emily Scott. I'm the neighborhood revitalization planner at the Tulsa Planning Office, and I've been in this role since October. And like Susan said, largely responsible for the facilitation of our new neighborhood planning program, the Vibrant Neighborhoods Partnership. So I'll start us off because this is brand new. We publicly launched near the end of January. So I'll talk a little bit about why or how we started this. The origins of this particular program are rooted in a lot of other recent city strategies, most notably our affordable housing strategy. The first goal in there is really trying to support and facilitate what neighborhood-led neighborhood development looks like. And this is really focused on that. But we also have some other pieces that blend into the creation of this program, including Resilient Tulsa and the AIM plan, which is more of an internal strategy where we look to align and focus our city work internally so that we're working towards the same goals, but largely looking to address life expectancy gaps or disparate outcomes that we've come to notice across our city. So looking at where places From a spatial perspective, maybe you're having limited access to opportunities or experiencing certain vulnerabilities. So really zooming in on those areas. And then also just overall looking to improve quality of life and improve quality places throughout the city, create a more resilient Tulsa. Oh, go back. We've also really modeled this program off of Oklahoma City's Strong Neighborhoods Initiative. So if you have some free time, I really encourage you to look at their website. There's tons of great information on there, and they have the benefit of having done this work for almost a decade. So we've been able to see some of the great successes and outcomes that they've had from this neighborhood planning approach. They've also been incredibly gracious with their time, collaborating with us on understanding some of their best practices, what they've learned through the years. And it's been great to have a partnership with them as we roll out our similar program here in Tulsa. But the vision of Vibrant Neighborhoods Partnership is to collaboratively and positively really affect the full environment of a neighborhood. So the built environment, but also the social and service environment of a neighborhood. And the mission, or how we intend to do that work, is to cultivate and facilitate a real diverse network of both public and private entities and resources to be able to focus those tools and resources in our neighborhoods, and in particular, those neighborhoods that this program could have the highest impact and may be experiencing the greatest need. So that is something to note for this neighborhood planning program, that there is an eligibility process. It is not citywide. So in order to address those areas that potentially have the greatest need, we do zoom in on those areas and then work with them on enrolling in the program. So how the program's intended to work is to have a bit of a neighborhood planning process at the beginning, but it's much more action oriented. So a 3 to 6 month planning process, engaging with the neighborhoods that are enrolled and creating more or less an action strategy so that there are some really tangible things that we can work on together. And then the bulk of the program involvement really comes from working together with the neighborhood. So we have an estimated timeline of about 3 years of engaging with the neighborhoods and actually supporting them with their implementation. So in essence, this kind of goes a bit of a step further from the small area planning process and getting us further along from policies and recommendations to actually get some things done together. And all in all, we want to be able to annually track our progress, and we want to be able to show successes and that we're working towards neighborhood improvement. So we will annually be tracking neighborhoods that are enrolled. This is just a snippet here from 8-year progress from one of Oklahoma City's neighborhoods that was involved. So you can see it's a very intricate, data-driven approach to understanding what neighborhood investment looks like, but also what success and outcomes can look like for these neighborhoods. So because this is a brand new program, most of what we've been working on for the past couple months has been program development. So a lot of internal analysis, again, going back to the eligibility part of this program. So understanding spatially where these neighborhoods of need are, understanding where vulnerability exists. We launched our application and informational workshop process shortly after that. So reaching out to those areas that we would like to apply, but also explaining the program, making sure they understand what enrollment looks like, what applying looks like. And we're actually nearing the end now of selecting our first neighborhood to work with. So end of March, we'll be announcing the first neighborhood that we'll start this work in, and then we'll start our planning phase. And throughout that program development, we've also been building a network of over 25 different external community partners who've been engaged in program development, but also really excited to be able to deliver support and services outside of the public scope. We've been engaging with 10 city department leaders to understand how we can align their work and programs and upcoming projects, and getting everybody on the same page about what it's going to look like to collaborate to deliver public resources for these neighborhoods. Also, tons of engagement and outreach with those eligible neighborhoods, and just also internally going back, working on just developing what it will look like to operationalize this program and make sure that it's a sustainable, ongoing program. So where we currently are is in that selection process, like I mentioned. We had 6 neighborhoods that applied for this first program year. You can see them there on the map. Our selection process involves lots of different persons. So we have a group of community partners who have volunteered to review the neighborhood applications and score them. Our city department leaders are weighing in, and we also have planning staff. So the rest of this month is dedicated to everyone digging into those applications. We have some scoring rubrics and some things to lean on, but we're also having just open feedback and conversations about what it would look like to work within these neighborhoods. Our first neighborhood, super exciting. We should be starting that work within April. And then near the end of this program year, early next year, really excited to be able to bring in another neighborhood. This is a program that's slated to expand, similar to destination districts, to multiple neighborhoods. So we're excited to be able to do that in the near future. So this, I'll start us off and then Louisa will bring us home. This is kind of what we've been working closely on, making sure that these programs are aligned. Like Susan mentioned, the neighborhood versus the commercial piece, and ideally a great place is a really symbiotic relationship there. So just in terms of how we can support each other's programs, in general, network sharing, so those community partners who've been engaging on both of our program developments and our work. It's been great to be able to build and continue to build our relationships with those entities. And that's a really great opportunity for collaboration with us, is to share in those networks. And then definitely, I think one of the most ideal things is if there's some geographic overlap, you can definitely see how we can work together and collaborate there. So if there's a neighborhood that already has an existing nearby destination districts, it'd be exciting to collaborate on some of those commercial or entrepreneurial support aspects that come with that program, but also for future development. If we're in a neighborhood and the neighbors are really excited to work on that component, we can bring in destination districts or Main Street type of supports to them, and maybe that becomes a Main Street opportunity in the future. So Louise is going to talk a little bit more about the rest of these ideas.
Oh, can you go back? Yeah. And then as far as just like alignment of opportunities, you know, we've thought about things like training and capacity building. So we want to support neighborhood and commercial district leaders. So what are the kind of trainings that we could offer to build their capacity to work in their own areas, or also like to work more effectively with the city? So we've thought about different training opportunities there. Like tech support, just kind of like data collection, things like that. We don't want to be reinventing the wheel every time somebody needs data collected in one of these areas. So we want to collaborate on like what that looks like, what those outcomes look like that we're tracking over time to measure progress. And then also just engagement support. You know, I think we're learning a lot of engaging with these organizations through Zoom or just, you know, every day, and like being able to share those lessons learned with not only each other, but also the groups that we work with, I think will support the programs. And then overall, we just want to grow these programs and how, you know, the Tulsa Planning Office is supporting community development efforts. So we've talked about things like identifying funding opportunities, if there's, you know, grants we could apply for together or that would support, you know, one or both of our programs. And then just really like being in regular communication of understanding best practices for how things are going in each program, so that, you know, they can learn from each other. If and when we go back to the office, I know one day we will, Emily and I will share an office. So that'll make things quite a bit easier of the, you know, collaboration between us. But really, I think that'll just help our programs grow. So I think that's all we have.
Does anyone have any comments or questions for Louisa or Emily? I know you'll be hearing a lot more about these programs, and I know that I think that it has been there's been some discussion of I think both these programs in the Tulsa world, and I think there'll probably be more as we select a neighborhood. You'll probably be reading about it. So we wanted to share those programs with you. We're really excited about what that's going to look like in the future. So if you don't have any questions for us or comments, then we can go ahead and sign off. Thanks for spending time with us, and we'll see you at 1 o'clock.